So now I'm coming to this. This is now going into the second part of the presentation. So are there any questions about the first half so far that you guys want to talk about now?
I think it's interesting, you know, people learning language over time and that ebb and flow that you were talking about, because my mum is not a native speaker. She is Indonesian, and she could speak intermediate level English before she came to the UK, and then she went to Wales. People, they speak English but with quite a strong accent, with a lot of different kinds of words or whatever, and you know, she's always picking up new phrases and new things, even though she's a fluent speaker now, you know, proficient speaker. But there's funny things that she'll always get wrong. For example, she'll say stuff like, oh, let's take the cross-cutting instead of the shortcut. And me, as her daughter, all of our family know what cross-cutting means, but nobody else knows what that means. So it's really strange the way, you know, she can write a business letter to people and then she'll use the word cross-cutting. And she'll never use the word bin because she thinks it's a stupid word. She'll use the Indonesian word for it, even though we know. Yeah, no.
Well, when my mum first moved to the UK, I think she was in the same position, maybe pre-intermediate, I would say. So she wasn't aware of register. So, and I think that's the biggest thing. It's learning about register more than language per se. So my mum was using really bad words without realizing how bad they were. So someone came to our doorstep, knocked on the door. In those days, there were door-to-door salesmen in the 70s, and he was selling encyclopedias. And she said, "Go away, you prick." He was quite upset.
I had the same thing happen when I lived in Mexico for 3 months, and when I was learning Spanish, I was learning from people who were from a lower kind of socioeconomic class. A lot of them were from a rougher part of town. A lot of them they weren't very educated, and a lot of them were also from the north of Mexico, where things are a bit different than the rest. They are definitely kind of more like New York, you know, here, where people are a little more rude and forward. And I moved to the center of Mexico, up in the mountains, and I was using words that stunned my students. They could not believe their teacher. Now these were adult students, luckily, so I didn't swear in front of children, but I was saying things, and they told me, "No, teacher, no, you can't say that." And I had no idea these were bad words, because these were just the way that my friends had always spoken.
But that's what your friends playing tricks on you as well. That's quite common. When friends would come over to visit me in Mexico and they'd ask me, "How do I ask for a beer?" I would always say something really naughty and tell them the wrong thing.
No, but I'm saying what I was doing. Okay, there's this marker in Spanish. It's pinche, which pinche in northern Spanish just means like
pinche pendejo.
Effing. It's not that bad. It's just like effing, like just saying the word effing. Yeah, it's not that bad though. Like it's something that people just use. They throw it around. It's just a marker. It's no big deal. However, in central Mexico, that is like saying the F word, like for real. It is a bad word, and it just had to do with pragmatics there. It was just used in a different way, because in the north, they use a lot more rough language, no problem. In the center and the south, though, their language is a lot cleaner. I cannot believe this is devolving into a swear fest, as always.
It's interesting, though, you know, it's kind of real language in a way, because you hear it all the time everywhere around in London. Anyway.
Di told me a funny story. He was in a bar with his brother, and his brother doesn't know English. And the waitress apparently said, "Oh, you're very handsome." And Di's brother tapped him and said, "What did she say?" "Y'all know Di." He goes, she just said you're ugly. And he goes, "Get out of here." To the poor female. He got mad. I know.
So I'm going to go ahead and move along to the next section, which is how is language acquired. I can tell you that language has two parts, and we don't really think of it this way, I don't think, normally, but language has two parts. There's passive knowledge, which is what a language learner can understand, so things they can read or when they're sitting and listening. And there's active knowledge, which is what a language learner can produce, so writing and speaking. And so something that I think surprises a lot of people who don't know much about language learning is that people may be able to understand a language or read a language, but they can't speak it or write it. And when I first found out about that, I thought, that's crazy. Like, if you can understand it, just write it down or just say it. You know, you have those words in your head, use them. But it's stored in different parts of the brain. And so the passive knowledge and the active knowledge are different. Now, this is my own idea right here. This is not backed by research. I'm just going to put it out there. I believe that passive knowledge is what you've learned, and active knowledge is what you have acquired. So passive knowledge is what you've sat and you've almost like in a school book kind of way memorized or learned. As where active knowledge is that which has actually become part of your interlanguage, your own version of English, and that's what you've actually acquired. Now, that may be true. It may just be my theory, but I'm putting it out there as my thought. So how is language acquired? Like I said, passive knowledge is the comprehensible inputs. They need to have English around them, but English that they can actually understand. Students need to be exposed to language in a real way, though, and in a way they can understand. Words and concepts need to be married in a real way. And I keep saying real because I feel like too many times we give a vocabulary list or we go over a grammar point or something, and the language is taken out of any sort of context. It's just language, it's just words being used on a, for words. But language is about being able to really marry an idea and a concept so that when you think of a cat, when I say cat, you have a picture in your head of a cat. But if someone said gato, and that's in Spanish, I shouldn't go gato, that means cat, okay, and then see a cat. Gato should bring to my mind the image of a cat, just the same as a cat. When I hear cat in English, I see a cat. So we here a lot of times use experiential learning. There are dogs here. Sorry, they're going crazy. Experiential learning allows students to do this so that whenever they hear the word cat in English City, they see a cat, or there's a cat playing around by their feet, and they're able to participate with the cat. So that we're not saying, cat, that's gato in your language. We're saying, this is a cat. Here's a picture of a cat. You see the cat. You hear cat. You hear the cat. You touch the cat. You're experiencing a cat, and you are hearing the word cat. And so cat becomes associated with the concept of a cat. And so that's why I'm saying passive knowledge should be done in a real way, that this language needs to be real and not just, words on a page or a sound that they hear. It needs to be that those phonemes, those sounds are associated with this real thing in life so that I'm putting that label on it. There's also active knowledge, which is output, speaking, and students need opportunities to produce. Students should be speaking in classes, not teachers. A classroom should be 70% students speaking and 30% teachers speaking. One way to do that is to allow students to lead discussions. If you're having a discussion group, maybe ahead of time tell a student, okay, next week you're leading the discussion group. Have some questions for your classmates. Or at the beginning of class, say, okay, we're going to be talking about going to the moon, and I'm going to ask Millie and Lowry and Jesse to lead discussions, so think of questions for your classmates. Negotiation of meaning in classes is another thing we need to have happening, where students are teaching each other, students are asking questions of each other, and students are summarizing each other's points of view. So the more the students are speaking in the classes, the better. Because I've spoken to a lot of our students, and English City is the only place where they really practice English. So we need to get them really tackling the language and really working on the language and negotiating meaning with each other. Because when you're acquiring language, you can learn as much from a non-native speaker as a native speaker. You're still going to improve as long as you're having to convey meaning to someone else and understand the meaning that they are giving you. Now, I understand, especially in very beginner classes, they may not have enough language to really work with yet, and so it's a little bit harder. Of course, yes.
I totally agree with you, the point about beginners and also the cultural point. A lot of our students come from cultures where, it's listen to the teacher, don't talk. And I think that's, that's one thing that we really have to encourage them. It's okay. You're not going to offend the teacher. You can talk, don't worry. Just go for it. Because they're like, ooh, teacher's talking. I've got to be quiet now,
100% true. Absolutely. Especially, I'm always told that in like the Asian cultures, teacher is knowledge. Teacher is supposed to pour their knowledge into the student. The student sits quietly and listens and is very respectful of the teacher. They cannot talk in their classes, so we have to tell them that's not how you learn language. Now, maybe if we were learning, I don't know, something else, another kind of concept, it would be a little bit more teacher focused. But whenever you're acquiring a language, it is about interaction and aggressively pursuing that knowledge. And I feel bad whenever I find that a student and I have started to speak at the same time, and they always want to defer to me, and they insist on deferring to me. But if I was speaking, it was only to get someone else to speak, and I always feel like, oh, if only I had known they were about to speak, I wouldn't have said anything, because I really want them to be the ones causing the conversation to happen. Another good thing about allowing students to lead discussions and to lead a class is that you are making the class tailored to their interest. And if a student is learning about things that they're interested in, they're going to be more active in their participation. And so allowing them to guide a conversation or a discussion, allowing them to go off, as we say, off on a chicken walk, go off task, they may be engaging in a conversation that they find more interesting, and they may be acquiring things that they want to acquire. And so I try to be open to whatever discussions occur, as long as English is happening around us in a real way. And one thing that we do have to be careful of is allowing one student to dominate, because it is great that student is producing language, but we have to make sure that everyone is having that opportunity to not only receive input but also output, because output is vital in language learning.